I'm a 72-year-old man, and my hands, though stiffened by arthritis and years of hard work, still remember how to work a lens. I spent most of my life behind a camera, capturing moments, freezing time. But nothing prepared me for the sickening truth I was about to capture: the downfall of our son-in-law, Marcus, a collapse that I was personally going to document, frame by painful frame. This is the quietest but the cruelest revenge I could ever imagine. My wife, Mary, is the center of my universe. She's been battling Parkinson's disease for the last 5 years, and it's a relentless, ugly fight. I retired early to become her full-time caregiver. Every day is a marathon, managing medication, physical therapy, making sure she doesn't fall. It is exhausting, but every smile I get from her, every moment of clarity, is worth the world to me. Marcus, on the other hand, had a different view of Mary's struggle. He saw dollar signs. He's always been charming, slick, and utterly useless when it came to holding down a job. He was a professional almost there, constantly needing a small loan to launch his next failed venture. Now, before we dive deeper into Marcus's sickening scheme, if you appreciate true stories of betrayal and complex revenge, please take a second to hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss how this plays out. Trust me, the details are worth sticking around for. The trouble started subtly, right after Mary's diagnosis progressed. Marcus launched a series of heartfelt social media campaigns. He called them Mary's Fight, complete with soft focus photos of Mary looking frail but brave, and lengthy tear-jerking captions about the crushing cost of dignity. The money started rolling in. At first I was touched. I thought, maybe he isn't so bad after all. My daughter Emily was ecstatic. She genuinely believed her husband was stepping up, becoming their family's financial rock, driven by love for her mother. I tried to believe it too, for Emily's sake, but the details never added up. Marcus would constantly complain to Emily that I, the old man, couldn't properly manage Mary's care or the household finances. He implied that the donations were necessary because my savings were inadequate. He positioned himself as the noble, overworked provider, navigating the world of grants and public sympathy that I was too old or too proud to handle. The truth was, every cent of my retirement and Mary's medical funds was meticulously accounted for. I'd spent 40 years as an amateur photographer, but 30 years as a strict bookkeeper for my own business. I knew where every penny went, and that's where the first crack appeared in Marcus's perfect facade. The donations started hitting $3,000, $5,000, then $10,000 in a single month. Yet Mary's needs weren't changing. We still used the same home health care aides, the same pharmacy. When I gently asked Marcus about the large sum that had recently cleared, mentioning we should look into a specialized therapy machine, he became instantly defensive. His charm evaporated, replaced by a cold, cutting hostility. He mumbled something about administrative fees and future-proofing, and warned me not to interfere with the funding stream. That's when the first spike of ice-cold certainty went through me. The money wasn't for Mary, it was for Marcus. My suspicion turned into a mission the day I saw him pull up to our modest home in a brand-new charcoal gray SUV, a model I knew cost at least $60,000. He claimed it was a loaner from a business associate, a perk from his next big thing. But a few days later, I saw the personalized license plate holder. He wasn't loaning it, he bought it. He was funding a luxury life by exploiting my wife's pain and using my daughter's love as a shield. I realized then that talking to Emily was useless. She was too deep in denial, too invested in the idea that her husband was a hero. I had to expose him, but I had to do it quietly, surgically, with irrefutable proof. I knew my only weapon wasn't my voice, it was the camera. The plan started taking shape, a chilling documentary-style expose. Marcus was about to learn that an old photographer sees everything, and patience is the most dangerous tool of all. The charcoal SUV wasn't just a car, it was a physical insult, a monument to Marcus's greed sitting right in my driveway. But trying to talk sense into my daughter, Emily, was like talking to a brick wall coated in Teflon. Nothing stuck. She was fiercely protective of him. "Dad, you just don't understand modern business," she'd snap, her voice edged with a defensiveness I hadn't heard since she was a teenager. "Marcus is networking. He needs to look successful to attract bigger donors. That SUV shows stability. He's doing this for Mom." The way she twisted his blatant self-indulgence into an act of sacrificial love was heartbreaking. I realized the true depth of the problem. He wasn't just stealing money. He was stealing my daughter's trust and using her emotional investment in her mother's well-being as leverage. I was completely isolated. If I continued to push, I would risk alienating Emily forever. I had to let the evidence speak for itself. I might be 72, but I'm not technologically inept. I'd built my own website for my photography business back in the 90s. So I started digging. I created a dummy social media profile, a benign-looking account that Marcus readily accepted. What I found wasn't just proof of minor extravagance. It was a carefully curated fantasy life running parallel to the Mary's Fight campaign. On his public feed, it was all grim updates, hushed tones, and pleas for medical funds. But on the semi-private profiles, where he thought only his inner circle looked, he was living the high life. There were check-ins at exclusive golf resorts an hour away, always on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, smack in the middle of what he called his crucial fundraising meetings. The subtle hints of luxury were everywhere. A close-up shot of a cigar with a flash of a recognizable, expensive Swiss watch on his wrist. A dinner plate at a five-star restaurant, the corner of his new SUV key fob casually sitting next to his wine glass. He wasn't even trying to hide it from those he thought were his friends. He was bragging. I started a meticulous log: date, time, location, claim purpose for the donation campaign, and the photographic evidence of the actual purpose: golfing, dining, shopping. I used my old photographer's eye, noting the quality of the light, the background details, the things that instantly date and verify a picture's authenticity. This wasn't guesswork, this was evidence collection, turning my hobby into an investigative skill. The most damning detail was a post from a major luxury watch dealer congratulating Mark F. on his new acquisition. The watch matched the one I'd seen on his wrist. The cost? Enough to pay for Mary's specialized physical therapy for an entire year. That single purchase galvanized me. He was literally betting our peace of mind and Mary's health against his own material ego. It was time to move beyond the digital footprint. I needed footage of his emotional performance, the two-faced monster living under our roof. The time for subtle tracking was over. It was time to set the traps. I walked straight to my dusty old workshop in the garage, the air thick with the smell of chemicals and old paper, and pulled down the heavy case containing my collection of retired camera gear. Marcus thought he was a mastermind. He was about to meet someone who saw the world in shutter speeds and focal lengths. The garage workshop smelled like history, a mix of old developer chemicals, paper, and the slightly metallic tang of machinery. I pulled out a worn aluminum case, my old field kit. Inside, nestled amongst foam padding, were relics: two simple webcams, an action camera, one of those early models that looked like a black cube, and a magnificent, if heavy, 35mm DSLR with a formidable telephoto lens attachment. Marcus might use the latest iPhone for his fake, candid shots, but these old tools were perfect for my dirty work. They weren't reliant on smart home networks he might monitor. They were low-tech and reliable. My years as a photographer weren't just about composition. They were about light, geometry, and, most importantly, camouflage. A good wildlife photographer knows how to become invisible. I started modifying the webcams. I carefully drilled small holes into two everyday objects: a large, ugly ceramic clock in the kitchen and an unused, dusty bookend in the living room. I needed angles that covered Mary's usual spots, the armchair, the dining table, but only captured Marcus's interaction with her, or lack thereof. My cover story was ready. I told Emily and Marcus that I was installing a new safety monitoring system. I explained that since Mary's tremors were getting worse, I needed video feedback to remotely check on her from my bedroom at night or when I stepped out for groceries to ensure she hadn't fallen. This was a perfectly logical move for a concerned caregiver and immediately diffused any suspicion Marcus might have had about surveillance. He even patted me on the back, saying, "Good thinking, Harry. See, you can still be useful." The sheer arrogance almost made me sick. Next was the long-range setup. I mounted the powerful telephoto lens onto the old DSLR. This setup wasn't for the house. It was for what I called the external audit, capturing Marcus's movements outside, proving the lavish spending. I set this up in my second-floor office, hidden behind a sheer curtain. The office faced the street and gave me a direct, unobstructed view of his new SUV and anyone entering or leaving it. I attached a small, quiet battery pack and an enlarged SD card to the camera, turning it into a silent, long-term witness. I meticulously checked the focus and shutter speed, making sure every captured image would be undeniably sharp, time-stamped, and completely damning. My strategy was dual-layered. The internal cameras would expose his emotional fraud and neglect, proving the hypocrisy of the Mary's fight posts. The external camera would document his financial fraud, capturing the expensive golf trips, the luxury errands, and the general air of carefree affluence he enjoyed while soliciting donations for his ailing mother-in-law. Everything was silent, hidden, and ready to record the slow-motion truth. The stage was set for Marcus to perform his double life, but this time he was performing for my camera. The cameras were running, silently recording Marcus's routine. I quickly realized my assumptions about his carelessness were right, but the sheer emotional violence of his performance was even worse than I had anticipated. The first week of footage was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, perfectly staged for his online audience. Every time Marcus decided it was time for a compassionate update, the routine was sickeningly predictable. He would step into the room, usually the living room where Mary sits in her favorite armchair by the window, and switch into character. His voice would drop an octave, adopting a tone of strained, saintly exhaustion. He would gently touch Mary's shoulder, perhaps rearrange the blanket he'd just tossed carelessly on the floor minutes earlier. He'd lean in and say things like, "We're going to get through this, Mary," or "It's a tough fight, but we're here for you." All while looking straight into the webcam he was holding, carefully positioning himself so Mary's face, frail and distracted by her tremors, was visible in the background. The sheer switch that occurred the second he hit the stop button was chilling. One video clip, which became a cornerstone of my evidence, was particularly damning. Marcus records a 30-second heartfelt message, ending with him softly kissing Mary on the forehead. As soon as the camera turns off, he sighs dramatically, loudly, as if shedding a physical weight. Mary then drops her cup, which thankfully was empty, and the sound of the clatter startles her. Marcus, who was just seconds ago her devoted caregiver, just rolls his eyes, mutters, "Seriously, Mary?" under his breath, and walks over to the couch, picking up his phone and completely ignoring her attempts to apologize. He didn't help her, didn't check if she was hurt, or even ask if she needed a drink. He just became instantly cold and dismissive. The contrast was incredible. 30 seconds of angelic devotion, followed by 30 minutes of brutal, silent neglect. The timestamp was proof. His public performance lasted exactly as long as his upload required. I continued to document these daily, smaller acts of emotional abuse. The way he'd leave the remote control just out of Mary's reach because he couldn't be bothered to hand it to her. The way he'd sit 3 feet away, talking loudly on his phone about his important deals, making it impossible for Mary to hear the television she was trying to watch. It wasn't overt violence, which would violate YouTube rules anyway, but it was a calculated, grinding cruelty, the slow death of decency. I felt a cold rage building. My daughter saw the man in the video. I saw the monster, living off the misery he claimed to be fighting. Now I had the undeniable footage, the proof of his internal fraud. But I needed the second part of the equation, proof of the external financial fraud. The in-house cameras had done their job of capturing his soul. Now it was time for the long lens to capture his wallet. My office on the second floor became my surveillance hub. It was quiet, and the sheer curtain offered perfect concealment for the heavy DSLR and its powerful telephoto lens. This lens, usually reserved for birdwatching and landscape shots, was now aimed squarely at Marcus's double life, the life he paid for with the donations meant for Mary. I felt less like a father and more like an old detective on a cold case. The internal recordings confirmed he was a fraud. The external audit was about confirming his theft. I tracked his routine. Marcus always left the house around 10:30 a.m. on non-golf days, claiming he had appointments with major institutional donors or was meeting his team. I quickly learned that his team consisted of expensive leather upholstery and the 24-hour news cycle on his SUV's dashboard. My first breakthrough came on a Thursday. I tracked him driving about 40 minutes away to a district I knew was full of high-end boutiques and exclusive cigar lounges. With the telephoto lens zoomed in to its maximum, I could capture details clearly from that distance, details that would be undeniable. I waited for 2 hours. The photos I took were chilling in their banality. There was Marcus, standing, outside a high-end watch repair shop, not wearing his watch, but holding a shiny box. His expression wasn't stressed or tired. He looked utterly relaxed, a picture of successful leisure. He was laughing with a woman, a casual acquaintance, I assumed, and they shared an expensive bottle of sparkling water. This was his work. This was the administrative cost of Mary's suffering. Another sequence captured him at a private golf club, the kind with mandatory expensive memberships. I managed to get a series of clear shots through a gap in the trees. He wasn't just playing, he was giving lessons, laughing with the other members, clearly thriving. In one frame, he was posing for a quick photo, showing off a new golf glove. This, less than 12 hours after posting an update saying Mary was having a difficult night, and that they desperately needed help covering a supposed specialized nurse's visit. The lie was monumental, and now it was documented in crystal-clear high definition. I made sure to capture not just his face, but elements that placed him precisely: the logo on the golf bag, the personalized license plate on his SUV, the distinct awning of the cigar lounge. Every photo had a GPS-enabled timestamp confirming the exact moment and location, completely obliterating any possible excuse he could invent. He couldn't claim he was meeting a donor in a country club. He was being the privileged patron. As I reviewed the images back in my dark office, the truth hit me with physical force. This wasn't just about money. This was about the calculated public exploitation of the one person I cherished most, all so he could live like a king while she struggled. The photographs were no longer just evidence. They were the cold, hard receipts of his betrayal. Phase 2 of the evidence collection was a resounding success, and I felt the plan shifting from a remote possibility to an inevitable certainty. The weight of the truth in those files was almost too much to bear alone. The evidence file was growing into a terrifying collection. Every morning I would check Marcus's social media. Every afternoon I would be out with the telephoto lens, tracking him like a shadow, often in tears of pure cold fury. The contrast between his digital life and his real life was a canyon, and I was documenting both sides. One morning, he posted an especially heartbreaking update, stating that Mary had been crying all night due to pain, and that the emergency fund was depleted, pleading for urgent help. That same afternoon, I tracked him downtown to a restaurant known for its 200 per person tasting menu. I positioned myself across the street and got a sequence of shots. Marcus laughing, clinking glasses with a colleague, and then the crucial detail, signing the bill. The camera was powerful enough to show the sleek, embossed leather folio the waiter held, screaming extravagance. It wasn't just the expense, it was the total lack of care he exuded when he wasn't filming. He was revitalized, energized by the stolen money, living a life of zero consequences. I also started documenting the small personal luxuries. He spent an entire Friday afternoon at a bespoke tailor getting measured for a custom suit. His online persona was the humble, struggling relative. His real-life persona was the privileged investor. When I zoomed in on his SUV's interior, I caught sight of a small, expensive gift bag, a designer handbag for my daughter, bought with money that should have gone towards Mary's specialized therapy. This was the deepest cut. He was not only stealing from Mary's care, but using the stolen funds to buy gifts for Emily, cementing her belief that he was a successful, generous husband. He was funding his own camouflage. This realization isolated me completely. I couldn't even share my evidence with Emily without shattering her world, which is why the documentation had to be irrefutable. The key pieces of evidence I collected that week weren't just the photos of golf and dinners, but the direct chronological link between his dramatic online pleas and the very next hour of his frivolous spending. Timestamp A, Marcus begging online, was followed by Timestamp B, Marcus ordering champagne. The paper trail was becoming as devastating as the video trail. I had enough footage of his private neglect, enough photos of his public luxury. I knew the moment was coming when I would have to stop being an observer and become the executioner of his reputation. The shift in Marcus was subtle at first, then rapidly noticeable. My careful documentation was beginning to affect him, not because he knew about the evidence, but because the sheer volume of his lies started making him paranoid. The amount of money he was soliciting, coupled with his high-risk lifestyle, was unsustainable, even for a seasoned fraudster. He started displaying a short, unpredictable temper, particularly when Mary was around. One afternoon I was in the kitchen, pretending to clean up, when Marcus came downstairs, clearly agitated. He was on the phone, speaking low and fast. "I don't know. It just feels like someone is watching the house. I keep seeing things out of the corner of my eye." He paused, his gaze sweeping the living room, lingering right where I had disguised a tiny web camera inside a decorative wooden clock. My heart pounded, but my expression remained placid. I just offered him a neutral. "Everything all right, Marcus?" He dismissed me with a wave of his hand, clearly not thinking the old man was a threat. But the fear had been planted. Over the next few days, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He started physically inspecting the rooms, running his hands over shelves, checking the backs of picture frames, even giving the electrical outlets a suspicious glance. He was looking for high-tech surveillance, the kind he saw in movies. He never considered the low-tech, perfectly concealed relic cameras I was using. My old photographer's eye, which specialized in finding unique perspectives, had served me well in hiding the truth in plain sight. The most stressful moment came when he tried to tamper with the camera near Mary's reading chair. After recording a tearful, overly dramatic appeal for funds, a performance so grotesque it made my stomach turn, he forgot to remove his ring, and a glint of metal caught his eye on the clock. He hesitated, then reached out. I held my breath. If he found that one, he might start looking harder for the others. Instead of removing the camera, he simply nudged the clock slightly, adjusting its angle. He was worried about the aesthetics of his performance backdrop, not about genuine surveillance. The clock was now aimed slightly higher, but still captured the critical zone. I later realized he was probably just moving it so the light hit him better in his next video. His vanity was my greatest security blanket. He was so consumed with his own image that he couldn't see the reality I was building around him. I knew my window for action was closing. His paranoia, though misplaced, meant the end game had to be executed soon, before he accidentally stumbled upon my operation. I spent the evening backing up all the video clips and photos to 3 separate external hard drives, preparing for the final devastating reveal. This was my element. My final act wouldn't be a confrontation, but an exhibition. It was time to stop capturing life and start editing it into a devastating narrative. I retreated to my office, locking the door, isolating myself with the 3 external hard drives. This wasn't just editing, it was an act of emotional triage, forcing myself to relive every moment of Marcus's calculated cruelty to ensure the final product was flawless. I named the project The Hero and the Real Cost of Care. The core principle was contrast. I needed to juxtapose Marcus's public performance with his private reality so brutally that the viewer would physically recoil. The structure was simple, following 3 devastating acts, all cut without any narration from me. The evidence spoke for itself. Act 1. The Performance. I took the most emotionally manipulative clips from his social media, Marcus kissing Mary's forehead, gently adjusting her blanket, his eyes welling up as he talked about hope. I would display the original social media post text on the screen, detailing the thousands of dollars they supposedly needed for specialized equipment. Act 2. The Switch. This was the most difficult part. Immediately following a clip from Act 1, the screen would split. On the left, Marcus's public post text would remain. On the right, the footage from my hidden clock camera would begin, displaying the time code clearly in the corner. We would see him turn off his phone's camera, then, within seconds, sigh dramatically, snap at Mary for a small noise, or simply walk away, leaving her struggling to reach a glass of water that was just inches out of her grasp. The time codes, e.g. 1:05 p.m., posting complete, followed by 1:07 p.m., neglecting Mary, were the hammers that sealed the coffin. Act 3. The Receipt. The final act cut violently to the external footage. I interspersed the internal cruelty with his expensive external pleasures. A short clip of him ignoring Mary was followed by a series of high-resolution, time-stamped photos. Marcus laughing at the golf club, Marcus purchasing the expensive timepiece, Marcus signing the restaurant bill. I made sure to include the social media status updates that coincided with the exact date and time of his luxury outings, proof that he was partying while begging for emergency funds. The entire video was precisely 4 minutes long, 4 minutes of pure chronological, undeniable truth. I deliberately kept the audio minimal, only including the environmental sounds captured by the cameras, the click of a closing door, the sharp sound of his sigh of impatience. No dramatic music, no voiceover. Adding my own voice would have turned it into a family feud. Keeping it sterile and factual turned it into a verdict. The last crucial step was the distribution method. I knew YouTube's policies are strict regarding privacy, harassment, and targeted attacks. Posting it publicly would risk immediate removal and allow Marcus to claim defamation or cyberbullying. My goal wasn't public shaming, it was surgical destruction of his reputation among the people who mattered, his donors and my daughter. I uploaded the final video to a private, secure server, a destination that couldn't be easily traced or censored. The stage was set for the quietest, most effective explosion of his life. The moment of deployment arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Marcus was out of the house, likely conducting major fundraising, which meant playing golf. Emily was busy working remotely in the spare room. Mary was napping peacefully. It was the perfect window. My hands, which had trembled slightly when operating the camera, were now steady as I composed the final chilling email. I didn't use a dramatic subject line. It was clinical. Factual documentation regarding the Mary's Fight funding campaign. I sent the link to the secure private video server. The recipient list was surgical. Emily, my daughter, 3 of our closest family friends who had donated sizable amounts, and, crucially, the executive director of the largest local community foundation that had recently featured Marcus as a local hero. That foundation was his golden ticket, and cutting that thread would sever his entire financial lifeline. Then I waited. There was no instant gratification, no dramatic confrontation, just the terrifying silence of the house, interrupted only by the soft, rhythmic breathing of Mary in the next room. I sat in my office watching the metrics on the private server. 1 view, 2 views, 3. Emily opened it 10 minutes after I sent it. The explosion didn't happen in a shout. It happened in a sound of crushing silence. About an hour later, I heard the door to Emily's office open. It wasn't the usual soft click. It was a rough, scraping sound. She didn't call for me. She just walked to the kitchen, opened the liquor cabinet, something she never did, and stood there motionless, staring at the bottles. I walked out slowly. Her face wasn't angry. It was devastated, hollowed out by disbelief and pain. She looked at me, holding her phone in her hand. The 4-minute video paused on a frame showing Marcus laughing hysterically at the golf club while she knew he was posting about Mary's unbearable suffering. Is this real, Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't try to soften the blow. "Every second is stamped with a time and date, Emily. I spent a month documenting his double life. Look at the clock in the living room. Look at the receipts. Look at your mother's face when he turns his back." She didn't cry yet. She sank into a chair, scrolling through the associated documents, the evidence of the SUV purchase, the banking statements I'd managed to piece together, the public plea versus the private reality. Then the true climax occurred, not with Emily, but with Marcus. His phone must have exploded with calls and messages, especially from the foundation director. Around 4 p.m., Marcus burst through the front door. He wasn't charming, he was a cornered animal. He looked directly at me, bypassing Emily entirely. You old man, what did you send? What is that link?" His voice was hoarse, fueled by panic, not bravado. I stood calmly in the archway, blocking his path. "It's the truth, Marcus. It's the cost of care you never paid, but happily charged others for." He lunged for his office, probably to check his accounts or try to spin a new lie, but Emily was quicker. She was already standing there, holding his work laptop, her posture rigid with a newfound terrifying clarity. "It's over, Marcus," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "The foundation called. Your accounts are frozen pending a full audit. They have the video. Everyone has it. Get your things. You have 5 minutes to get out of this house and out of our lives." He looked from Emily, who was his financial shield, to me, the silent observer who had brought him down. He realized that the quiet documentary I had created had ruined him surgically, legally, and financially. He didn't argue. He didn't even try to charm his way out. He knew the video was undeniable. In a moment of pure, panicked self-preservation, he grabbed a duffel bag and vanished out the back door, disappearing from our lives forever. The house, which had been tense for years, suddenly felt vast and silent, finally free of the parasite. The air in the house changed instantly. It wasn't just the absence of Marcus's manipulative presence, it was a physical lightening of the atmosphere. The tension that had been building for years, a slow-acting poison, suddenly evaporated. Emily, my daughter, was broken, yes, but she was also free. It took her several weeks to process the sheer depth of the betrayal, but she never looked back. She divorced Marcus quickly, quietly, and without a fight, as he was too busy trying to salvage his non-existent reputation and avoid legal action from the donors he defrauded. Emily moved back in with us temporarily. It was tough at first, full of tears and necessary apologies, but the closeness we had lost was restored. Crucially, she saw the reality of Mary's care and, for the first time, became an active, engaged caregiver alongside me. The funds that were recovered from Marcus's frozen accounts and some of the donations that were returned by the foundation went directly into specialized care and equipment for Mary, the very things Marcus had pretended to be raising money for. Our life stabilized and, dare I say, flourished. Mary, receiving specialized physiotherapy and knowing the emotional parasite was gone, became noticeably calmer and happier. The house, once a stage for drama, became a haven of peace. And me? Harry, the 72-year-old amateur photographer, found a new purpose. The process of documenting Marcus taught me that my skills, patience, attention to detail, and knowing how to find a truth hidden in plain sight, were still incredibly valuable. I didn't just save my family, I saved myself from the quiet despair of old age. I started a small online consultation service, not for money, but to teach other elderly caregivers and their families how to spot financial and emotional fraud, specifically within family units. I called it the Long Lens Project. I used the anonymized lessons learned from Marcus's downfall to help others protect their vulnerable loved ones. I finally felt like I was using my old skills to truly make a difference, passing on the knowledge of how to fight back, not with anger, but with cold, hard facts. I am not a rich man, but I am a man with a clear conscience, a healed family, and a happy wife. Marcus vanished completely, swallowed by his own greed and shame, and we never heard from him again. My revenge wasn't loud or aggressive. It was documentation, shared strategically and precisely. I won the quiet war with a camera and a secure private link. So that's the end of my story. I need to know, looking back at the deceit, the betrayal of my wife, and the manipulation of my daughter. Did I do the right thing? Was my calculated, silent revenge the best way to handle a family parasite like Marcus? What would you have done in my position? Let me know in the comments below. If this story of justice and documentation resonated with you, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the shocking true stories and revenge tales we share. Thank you for listening.